Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell you one thing, I feel a whole lot better today than what I felt that Sunday morning. Oh, man. It was not pretty. Well, tell me, how many of you got brothers and sisters? How many of you when you were kids? It's messed up time. How many of you when you were kids ever made a declaration? I'm going to get you for that. Anybody do that? Come on, mess up. Mess up. Or equally ominous, you'll get yours. Just you wait. Yeah. And just as those words left your lips, they're picked up by the ever alert and perceptive ears of an unnoticed parent, usually of a mother persuasion, who administered an immediate attitude adjustment, sometimes by merely calling out your name sharply. Robert! Any of your parents ever do that to you?
I have no name.
Yeah. If I heard Robert David, I was in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah, my name was just Lisa. So. Lisa.
Usually took a sail, the wind out of your sails pretty quick, didn't it? Kind of calmed down, so to
He
speak.
had Robert. He was called my mom.
Or they may have issued some other summary administrative action.
Louise.
Well, as kids, when we sometimes do something that you don't like, somebody does something to you, you just seek a recourse of revenge. And of course, none of you ever sought revenge on your siblings, did you? Never once. Yeah, right. When somebody slapped you, what's your first natural impulse? Bam! You're going to slap back, aren't you? And you know what? It's going to be twice as hard as what they hit you, isn't it? It's not going to say, oh, you're going to let them have it. Someone insults you, first thought is to insult them back. Some of you can probably remember some good zingers you laid on some other people in your younger years. Maybe in some of your adult years. Bill Cosby has interviewed thousands of children and received hilarious responses to his questions. He was talking to a little boy one time named Peter. And he said, do you try to do things that Jesus told you to do? Peter says, Jesus hadn't told me to do anything yet. Cosby said, well, how about if somebody hits you on a cheek? Would you turn the other cheek? He said, what does that mean? Cosby says, that means that somebody hits you, you don't hit them back. Peter looked kind of confused, and he said, that didn't sound too smart. Cosby said, well, that's the whole point of what Jesus said, Peter. You have to be bigger than the other person. Peter sat there and he thought for a moment. And he said, well, that makes some sense, because if you're bigger, then you can hit him back. Jane Wagner shared that my friend, 4 boys were young and bursting with energy, especially in church, like my grandson back there. But the sermon her minister preached on turning their cheek got their undivided attention. Minister stressed that no matter what others do to us, we should never try to get even. That afternoon, the youngest boy came into the house just crying to be back. Between his sobs, he told his mother he kicked at one of his brothers, who kicked him back. She said, well, I'm sorry that you hurt. But you shouldn't go around kicking people. Through his tears, the child said, but the preacher said he wasn't supposed to kick me back. In society today, sometimes we still seek revenge. Or through settled school. In many situations today, someone usually ends up very seriously injured or dead. Revenge is used to justify violence against a supposed offender, even if the situation was accidental in nature or no offense intended. There's no commandment of Jesus which has caused so much discussion and debate as a commandment to love our enemies. We need to understand what this really means if we're to fully obey it. In Greek, there's 3 words for love. Eros is the love of man for woman. Phileo, which is the love of our nearest and dearest and the warm affectionate heart. Then there's an agape, which is the active feeling of benevolence towards other humans. No matter what that person does to us, we'll never allow ourselves to desire anything but their highest good. And we'll deliberately and of set purpose go out of our way to be good and kind to them. I'm sure you all do that, don't you? With every person you meet, no matter how you feel about them. We need to do that. No matter what the person does to us, even if they insult us, ill-treat us, injure us, we'll seek nothing but their highest good. The love we bear towards our enemies is not only something of the heart, it's something of the will. It's something which by the grace of Christ we may will ourselves to do. You know, if you read through the Gospel, there's only 2 books in the Gospel that even touch on this teaching from Christ. The other passage is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, 43 through 48, but it isn't quite as in-depth as Luke's passage. But Matthew says, "You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that they may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. The sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your brothers, are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? But perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." See, the Jews despised the Romans because they oppressed God's people. But Jesus told the people to love their enemies. And such words turned many away from Christ. But Jesus wasn't talking about having affection for the enemies. He was talking about an act of the will. You can't fall into this kind of love. It takes conscious effort. Loving an enemy means acting in their best interests. And that's tough. That's really tough. We all know that if someone else does something wrong to us, our first reaction is to get even. That's why there's so much road rage on the highways today. I'm going to cut you off, man. I'll get him back. Man, I'll zip around and cut him off even shorter he cut off me. So many actions we cause. Instead, Jesus said we should do good to those who wrong us. Our desire should not be to get even a score, but to love and forgive. And that, folks, is not a natural thing for us as human beings. It's really supernatural. Because only God can give us the strength to love as He does. Instead of planning vengeance, pray for those who hurt you. You know, Jesus gives us a positive ethic, which is not consistent not doing things, but in doing them. Jesus gives us the golden rule, which bids us to do to others as we would have them do to us. And that rule exists in many writers of many creeds in its negative form. Hillel, one of the great Jewish rabbis, was asked by a man to teach him the whole law while he stood on one leg. And he answered, "What is hateful to thee, do not to another." This is the whole law, and all else is an explanation. And Philo, the great Jew of Alexandria, said, "When you hate to suffer, do not do to anyone else." Isocrates, the great Greek orator, said, "What things you make angry when you suffer, live at the hands of others, do not you do to other people." And the Stoic says, one of their basic rules, what you do not wish to have done to yourself, don't do to somebody else. That's what it says. And even Confucius, of all people, there's one word which may serve as a rule of practice for all one's life, he answered. It's reciprocity. What a word. What you do not want done to yourself, don't do to others. Every one of these forms is negative. It is not unduly difficult to keep yourself from such action. But it's very difficult to go out what you would want them to do to you. The very essence of Christian conduct is that it consists not in refraining from things, but in actively doing good things. See, love means action. One way to put love to work is to take the initiative in meeting specific needs. We can all agree it's easy to love people that love us. And very easy. People whom we trust. But love means doing even this to people who dislike us. People who plan to hurt us. When we give someone something as a gift, it shouldn't be used as a pawn to extract something back in return. We are to give as if we are giving to God. Jesus described the common ways of sensible conduct and then dismissed them with the question, what special grace is in that? You know, so often people claim to be just as good as their neighbors. But Jesus' question is, how much better are you than the ordinary person? Is not our neighbor with whom we must compare ourselves? We may well stand that comparison very adequately. It is God with whom we must compare ourselves. In that comparison, we may be in great default. You know, we can find competitors becoming enemies. Not just in business, but in the family. Brothers, sisters. Spouses compete just like the kids do. Friends compete, neighbors compete. And there's nothing wrong with that. But feelings can be rubbed raw from that. Resentment can build. Soon a neighbor is secretly glad to see another neighbor's misfortune. Oh, I'm so sorry you broke your leg. Who is your enemy? There may be persons whom we secretly harbor ill feelings toward, but we've never thought to classify under Jesus' definition as enemies. But in a sense, they are enemies. They are persons for whom we have ill feelings, or they are persons who harbor ill feelings toward us. And of course, some enemies may arise because we try to do things right. We all have enemies. If you live in this life, you can't be without them sometimes. They're going to crop up somewhere. No matter what we do throughout life, we're still going to have some enemies that we'll never win over. And some we will. Judas Vorst's children's book, I'll Fix Anthony. The younger brother complains about the way his older brother Anthony treats him. He says, my brother Anthony can read books now, but he won't read any books to me. He plays checkers with Bruce from school. But when I want to play, he says, go away, I'll clobber you. I let him wear my Snoopy sweatshirt. Then he lets me borrow his sword. That's questionable. Ooh. Mother says deep down in his heart, Anthony loves me. Anthony says deep down in his heart, he thinks I stink. Mother says deep down in his heart, where he doesn't even know it, Anthony loves me. Anthony says deep down in my heart, he still thinks I stink. When I'm 6, I'll fix Anthony. When I'm 6, I'll float, but Anthony will sink to the bottom. I'll dive off the board, but Anthony will change his mind. I'll breathe in and out when I should, but Anthony will only go glug glug. When I'm 6, my teeth will fall out, and I'll put them under my bed, and the tooth fairy will take them away, leave dimes. Anthony's teeth won't fall out. He'll wiggle and wiggle them, but they won't fall out. I might even sell him one of my teeth, but I might not. Anthony's chasing me around the playroom. He thinks I stink. He says, I'm going to clobber you. I have to run now. I want to run when I'm 6. When I'm 6, I'll fix Anthony. You see how these brothers are missing out? Instead of playing and romping, these boys are trapped in a negative cycle of jealousy, of anger, and bullying. Can you just imagine how their relationship would change if Anthony would read his favorite story to his younger brother? Or realize the person who's potentially his biggest fan in the entire world is just about done with him for good? Sounds like younger brother might be done turning the other cheek, plotting revenge. Which only hurts both kids and poisons one of the most important relationships in both their lives. You know, the biggest thing you learn about revenge is it's empty. It's empty. Once you've exacted your revenge, where do you go and what do you do? Somebody hits you, you slap them back. Now what do you feel? You may feel good for the moment. But where do you go from there? Have you built anything in that relationship? Nada. Not a thing. Not a thing. It's empty. There's no reward. There's nowhere up. Makes you wonder. You know? In fact, an anonymous person once said, for a long time, I used to think this is silly. Straw-splitting distinction. How could you hate what a man did and not hate the man? But years later it occurred to me that there was one man to whom I had been doing this all my life. Namely, myself. In fact, the reason I hated the things was I loved the man. Just because I loved myself. I was sorry to find that I was the sort of man who did those things. Consequently, Christianity does not want us to reduce by one atom the hatred we feel for cruelty and treachery. But it does want us to hate them in the same way in which we hate things in ourselves. Being sorry for the man should have done such things and hoping there's any way possible that somehow, sometime, somewhere, he can be cured and made human again. Who are your enemies? Your enemy could be someone who is tempting you to do wrong. Your enemy may be someone who has hurt you in the past. That hurt lingers and will not go away. Your enemy could be someone who you simply disagree with very strongly. But that disagreement has caused a barrier to be erected between the two of you. Who is your enemy? That's the first question for the day. The second is this. How is your enemy affecting you spiritually? You secretly harbor resentment toward that person. This is probably the most common spiritual problem among Christians. We're nice people. Ask any of us. We're nice people. We're good. We're Christians. We wouldn't openly harm anyone. But boy, can we bear a grudge. Are you hearing into that? The problem with harboring angry feelings towards someone else is, again, what are those feelings doing to us? Susan Collins said, a need for revenge can burn long and hot. Excuse me. Especially if every glance in the mirror reinforces it. Interesting thought. Spiritual retaliation is deadly. Retaliation does permanent damage, not only to our enemy, but to us as well. We become different people. We become twisted and evil. But that's one way of dealing with an enemy. Retaliation. But thank God Jesus says there's a third way to deal with an enemy. We can love it. Sometimes for our own sake. Because it's the only way we can deal with our enemies. When the girls were in high school, I always enjoyed planning vacations. We go somewhere to have some fun, but also get us some learning. Girls hated that sometimes. One vacation we went to the Holocaust Museum. And while there, survivor of Auschwitz, biographic books, which I now have a copy. I was privileged to get that. Here's a woman who exemplified the meaning of love your enemy. She survived the Holocaust. Her parents did not. There were Dutch Christians caught by the Nazis for hiding Jews in their home. She watched the horrors of the genocide from Auschwitz and barely survived. Following the war, she became famous for her book, The Hiding Place, which shared the story of her family. The title of the book gave her the opportunity to share her faith with thousands of people on speaking tours. And one such evening, as she had spoken about the forgiveness of Christ, a man approached her whom she recognized as one of the guards from Auschwitz. She really felt all the horror and the pain and hatred for those years of persecution. As he approached her, he told her that he had listened to her talk and informed her that he had been a guard at the death camp. She said that she recognized him. Crying, he asked if he might receive forgiveness of Christ, of which she had spoken. And she thought to herself, how could she not? But she remembered the command of Christ to love your enemy and to forgive 70 times 7 the person who had wronged you. And she prayed to Jesus that he might give her the strength to forgive the man. And as she prayed, she felt a sensation begin in her heart and flow through her hand as it touched his. As she heard herself saying, in the name of Jesus Christ, I forgive you. The man collapsed to her feet and wept a prayer of thanks. She discovered that he had become a minister of the gospel, and that many people had come to Christ through his ministry. We never know how far God can spread the love that we give. Indeed, we even perhaps receive love from someone that was born from such an act of loving forgiveness in someone else. We love our enemies because we recognize that Christ died for them too. Remember them on the cross. Those who persecuted him, those who beat him, those who shamed him, those who put thorns on his head and nailed him to that cross. He died for them as well as for us. Here they showed hate, discontent for him. We love because our enemies, we know that the power of love is stronger than any depth to which we can fall. In the end, it boils down to this, folks. Forgiving your enemies is the first step toward loving them. You say, well, Pastor, what he did to me or she did to me was too horrible. I can't forgive. And the question I present to you is, who's your anger and resentment hurting most of all? My guess is, it's worse to you than it is on your enemy. So why not begin with a clean slate from this day forward? Why not clear the decks and make a clean start today?